Syria, a country in Western Asia, has a rich and fascinating history. Some of the world's very first civilizations began in its fertile lands. Damascus, its capital, is a powerful reminder of this long history. The city still echoes with the memories of empires from long ago. From ancient Mesopotamia to the Roman Empire, Syria has seen many powerful empires rise and fall. Because of its important location, many wanted to control Syria. Trade routes crossed through its land, connecting the east to the west. This central location brought wealth, but also many wars. Syria's story is one of cultures coming together, but also of conquests and battles. But through it all, the Syrian people have survived, made strong by their history. Syria's modern history has been a bumpy ride. In 1946, Syria finally broke free from France's rule. They were ready to make their own choices. But it wasn't easy. The government was shaky and power struggles were everywhere. A good future seemed far away, but the Syrian people never gave up. They faced every problem head-on. They were known for their toughness. Syria's story shows how strong people can be, even in hard times. The journey to freedom for Syria was full of obstacles. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire, which had been in charge of Syria for many years, fell apart. The winners of the war, known as the Allied powers, divided the region, creating new boundaries and setting up mandates. France took control of Syria, a land with many valuable resources and a strategic location. The French Mandate period, from 1920 to 1946, brought significant changes. France wanted to spread its influence on Syrian society. They brought in new ways of governing, restructured the economy, and encouraged the use of the French language and culture. However, this control by a foreign power also caused anger and led to resistance. Syrian nationalism, a strong sense of pride in their country, emerged in response to French rule. Nationalist leaders, thinkers, and activists came together to oppose foreign control. They demanded the right to govern themselves and an end to colonial rule. The desire for independence was deeply felt by the Syrian people. They longed to be in charge of their own affairs, to shape their own future without outside interference. The French authorities reacted to this growing nationalist movement with a combination of suppression and compromise. They tried to silence opposition while making small efforts to satisfy Syrian desires for self-governance. However, the seeds of discontent had been planted, and the longing for freedom only grew stronger. World War II really changed things around the world. It made the European countries that controlled colonies weaker. France, which was taken over by Nazi Germany, started to lose its hold on Syria. When the war ended in 1945, it was a new beginning. Lots of places controlled by others wanted to be free. Syria was one of them. They saw this as their chance to get out from under colonial rule. Finally, on April 17, 1946, Syria got what it had wanted for so long: independence. French troops left the country, which meant the time of being ruled by France was over. Now, the new Syrian Republic had a big job ahead: building a nation. They had to figure out who they were as a country, set up a government where people had a say, and deal with all the changes happening in the world. The birth of independent Syria was a time of both hope and uncertainty. The joy of freedom soon gave way to the challenges of building a new nation. The country was like a mosaic of diverse ethnic and religious communities, each with its own hopes and worries. Finding common ground and building a shared national identity proved to be a very difficult task. The world of politics reflected this complex society. Many political parties emerged, each with a different idea for the future. The lack of established democratic traditions and institutions made the move to self-rule especially fragile. Power struggles and political maneuvering became common, casting a dark cloud over the young republic. The first 15 years after Syria became independent were a messy time, with lots of power struggles and military takeovers. The army, with its organized structure and weapons, became really important in politics. Ambitious military leaders, some with strong beliefs and others wanting power, thought they should be in charge of the country. In 1949, the army overthrew the government of Shukri al-Quwatli, who had been elected by the people. This was a bad sign because it made it seem okay for the military to get involved in politics. In the next few years, Syria had many different leaders, each one put in power and removed by the military. All this instability made it hard to build a strong democracy, and people felt scared and unsure about the future. In 1958, during this time of unrest, Syria tried something new. The United Arab Republic. It didn't last long, but it was important. Gamal Abdel Nasser, the leader of Egypt, had a dream of all Arab countries uniting. He was a very charismatic leader, and he convinced Syria to join with Egypt to create a strong Arab nation. They hoped to be strong enough to face any threats and bring all Arabs together, but the union wasn't easy. Nasser ruled everything from Cairo, and he didn't allow Syrian political parties to have any power. This made many Syrians angry. Syrians wanted to make their own decisions, but Egypt was in control. In 1961, the military in Damascus took over the government and ended the United Arab Republic. Syria was independent again, but the experience left them disappointed. The dream of a united Arab world seemed impossible. When the United Arab Republic fell apart in 1961, Syria was thrown into even more chaos. The country's politics were still a mess, with power struggles, groups fighting for control, and the military splitting into different sides. In this unstable situation, a young officer in the Air Force named Hafez al-Assad started his climb to the top. Assad came from a humble Alawite family in the countryside of Syria. His rise to power showed how ambitious and politically skilled he was. He became a member of the Ba'ath Party, a group that believed in Arab unity and socialism. They were becoming very influential in Syria, and Assad quickly moved up in the party. Assad understood that the military held a lot of power in Syrian politics, so he carefully made sure he had a strong position within it. In 1963, the Ba'ath Party, with Assad playing a key role, took control of Syria in a sudden takeover. Assad, first made defense minister, slowly gained more power in the government and the party. He removed those who challenged him, kept decision-making centralized, and created a widespread security system to watch for opposition and keep his power. In 1970, Assad started what he called the corrective movement, a takeover without violence that pushed out the existing Ba'ath leaders and made him the absolute ruler of Syria. This began Assad's rule that would last for decades, known for its strict control, silencing of opposition, and a system where he was glorified and his image was everywhere in Syrian society. Section 3, the Hama Massacre, a brutal chapter. Assad's rule wasn't always easy. A group called the Muslim Brotherhood, who followed Sunni Islam, challenged his power. In 1982, the Brotherhood, seeing people were unhappy with Assad, started an uprising in the city of Hama. Assad responded with extreme force, sending the full military to attack the city. This event, known as the Hama Massacre, was a terrible time in Syrian history. For weeks, the Syrian army bombed Hama, turning entire neighborhoods to piles of rubble. Thousands of regular people, including women and children, were killed and many others vanished. The massacre showed everyone that Assad would do whatever it took to stay in power, even if it meant hurting his own people. Section 1. Inheritance of Power. When Hafez al-Assad died in 2000, his son, Bashar al-Assad, took over as leader. Bashar had studied in London and become an eye doctor. He was very different from his father, who was a strict military man. People saw Bashar as someone who might bring change. They hoped he would make Syria a more open and free country, unlike his father's strict rule. The things Bashar said at the beginning of his time as leader made people think things were going to be different. He talked about making changes, modernizing Syria and giving people more freedom. This time became known as the Damascus Spring. It was a time when people felt a little bit hopeful. Smart people, activists, and everyday Syrians started to think that maybe things really could change. They started having public discussions, questioning things that had always been the same and asking for more say in how their country was run. Section 2, a glimmer of hope. However, the Damascus Spring didn't last long. Bashar at first seemed okay with people disagreeing with him, but soon everyone saw what he was really like. The changes he'd promised were just for show. He wanted to hold on to his power, not make things truly better. The security forces, a big part of his father's rule, were still very powerful. They controlled Syrian society just as tightly as before. As Bashar became more powerful, people who had hoped for a different Syria started to criticize him. Activists, journalists, and human rights defenders who spoke up against corruption, human rights abuses, and the lack of freedom were harassed, intimidated, and put in jail. The government wasn't okay with disagreement anymore. They went back to their old ways of silencing people. The year 2011 was a big turning point for Syria. People in Syria saw the Arab Spring protests happening in North Africa, and they started protesting too. At first, the protests were peaceful. People wanted the government to change and stop being corrupt. But the Assad regime, which was in power, reacted very harshly. The security forces even shot at people who were protesting peacefully. Hundreds of people were killed or hurt. Because the government was so violent, more people started to fight back. This led to a bigger rebellion. What started as people wanting democracy turned into a huge war. Syria was now caught in a cycle of violence and chaos. It was a humanitarian catastrophe. Syria, which was once a beautiful country, was now a nightmare. Cities were destroyed and people had to leave their homes. Everyone was suffering. As the Syrian civil war continued, it attracted regional and international powers, each one focused on its own goals and plans. The conflict turned into a complicated proxy war with outside forces influencing its direction. Syria became a battlefield for clashing ideologies and ambitions. These interventions from other countries had a huge impact on the Syrian people. They made the violence worse, deepened the humanitarian crisis, and made it even harder to find a peaceful way to end the conflict. The flow of weapons and foreign fighters into the country only added fuel to the fire, turning Syria into a breeding ground for extremism and making the suffering of its people last even longer. Millions of Syrians had to leave their homes, looking for safety in nearby countries or going on dangerous trips to Europe. The war destroyed Syria's infrastructure, ruined its economy, and left its people traumatized by years and years of violence. The international community tried to help, and they did a lot, but it often wasn't enough and became very political. They couldn't stop the suffering of millions of Syrians caught in the middle of the war. Involvement from other countries broke Syria apart, both geographically and as a society. Outside forces gave power to different groups within Syria, dividing Syrians based on their ethnicity, religion, and political beliefs. ISIS took advantage of the disorder and took over large areas. Syrian Kurdish forces created their own self-governing area, making the political situation even more complex. The civil war turned into a fight with many sides, with foreign powers influencing how it unfolded. As the Syrian civil war continued into its 10th year, more and more people suffered. The country, once full of life, was left in ruins. Its people were scattered, and its economy was destroyed. The involvement of foreign powers and their conflicting interests created a lot of uncertainty about Syria's future. The Syrian people, known for their resilience, faced the difficult task of rebuilding their lives. The Syrian civil war has left a permanent mark on the country and its people. You can see the physical damage of the war in the destroyed cities and ruined landscapes. Many lives have been lost or changed forever. We can't even measure the emotional and mental impact of the war. But even in the middle of all of this destruction, there are still signs of hope. The Syrian people are known for their strength and spirit, and they haven't given up. They are showing incredible strength and are dedicated to rebuilding their lives and communities. The road to recovery will be long and difficult. The war has left deep wounds. It will take a lot of time and effort to rebuild what was destroyed and help people come together again. Even though things are hard, the Syrian people are strong. They still believe in peace and a better tomorrow. This is a story about their strength, their hope, and the amazing spirit we all have inside. As the dust begins to settle and the echoes of conflict fade, Syria stands at the threshold of a new era. The liberation has brought with it a renewed sense of hope and possibility. The new liberation flag, adorned with 3 stars, flutters proudly in the wind, symbolizing unity, freedom, and a future built on the dreams of its people. The streets, once marred by devastation, now show signs of life and rebuilding. Families return to their homes, children play in the alleys, and communities come together to heal the wounds of war. The resilience that has defined the Syrian spirit throughout history shines brighter than ever. But the road ahead is not without challenges. Reconstructing a nation torn apart by conflict will require immense effort, cooperation, and international support. Yet, the determination of the Syrian people remains unshaken. They look to the future with a steadfast belief in the promise of peace and prosperity. The 3 stars on the new flag remind us of the sacrifices made, the lives lost, and the enduring hope for a united Syria. It is a powerful symbol of a nation's journey through darkness, emerging stronger and more unified. As Syria moves forward, the world watches with bated breath, inspired by the indomitable spirit of its people. This is not just the story of a nation's recovery, it is a testament to the unyielding human spirit that refuses to be broken. The Syrian spirit endures, and with it the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As the sun sets over the ancient land of Syria, a new dawn emerges. The country's journey through hardship and turmoil has led to this pivotal moment. The new flag of Syria, waving gently in the breeze, bears witness to the sacrifices and resilience of its people. The 3 stars on the flag symbolize unity, freedom, and a commitment to building a future rooted in the dreams and aspirations of every Syrian. The nation stands at the cusp of a transformative era where the lessons of the past guide the vision for a brighter tomorrow. With the adoption of a new constitution, Syria pledges to uphold the principles of justice, equality, and democracy. This new framework seeks to ensure that the rights and voices of all citizens are respected and protected, paving the way for a more inclusive and prosperous society. As we close this chapter, we look ahead with hope and determination. The road to recovery and reconstruction is long, but the spirit of the Syrian people is unbreakable. Together, they will rebuild their nation brick by brick, heart by heart. And so we conclude our journey with a promise. Syria will rise anew with a new flag and a new constitution, embodying the dreams and aspirations of its resilient people. The Syrian spirit endures, and with it, the promise of a brighter, united future.